Being a kid isn't always easy. You have to worry about a bunch of different subjects in school, homework, and relationships with other kids. But for some students, all of this is especially difficult. Today, it's estimated that nearly 11% of school-age kids have something called ADHD. I've heard about this ADHD thing, but I've never really known anything about it. So I decided to do some research on the subject. I thought I'd start by just asking around at the local park. What does ADHD stand for?
Boy, now I can't remember.
I'm not really sure.
Good question. I should know that.
I actually have no idea. I know it's attention deficit something.
I think it's attention deficit something.
Attention deficit disorder or something like that.
Well, I know the AD is attention deficit and D is disorder. I don't know what the H is.
Do you know what ADHD is?
Well, it's a problem that some young kids have, and adults too, I think.
You can't focus on what's most important at the time. You get easily distracted by shiny objects.
It's very in trend right now. Like a lot of kids nowadays have that disease, and sometimes like doctors give a lot of medication for that.
People who can't sit still long enough to learn something.
I think it's a condition where people have trouble focusing for long periods of time.
Fidgety or maybe anxious.
The nerve endings don't operate, or the nerve synapses don't work like they're supposed to.
It's a, oh look, a butterfly.
What does ADHD stand for? You're really cute. Well, maybe talking to some random humans and canines in the park wasn't the best idea. I think I better find someone who knows what they're talking about. I decided to visit with Dr. George Sachs, director of the Sachs Center, which specializes in assessing and treating ADHD.
ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, which is really divided into three different types. You have inattentive type, hyperactive type, and combined type. Inattentive type, imagine you're in school and you're a kid with inattentive type ADHD. It's just really hard to focus on the teacher, especially on subjects you're not that interested in, like science or English.
Or reading, or Spanish, or algebra, or social studies. Yeah, I get it. I have no interest in any of that.
It's just extremely hard to pay attention, and it's not like you're in science class and you just space out for 20 minutes. What happens is you space out for 3 minutes, and then you catch yourself, and then you try and focus for about 30 seconds, and then you find yourself drifting off.
Or maybe you just drift down for the entire class. Okay, that's the inattentive type. What's next?
And now there's a second type called hyperactive type, and that's the kid in school you might have seen that can't sit still, has to get up behind their desk, move around. They're always asking the teacher a million questions. They have to go to the bathroom like 10, 15 times. They just have to move their body. It's something inside them is saying they need to move their body, and sitting still for long periods of time, like a 50-minute class, is really uncomfortable for them.
Especially if that class is algebra.
Combined type obviously is the combination of both inattentive type and the hyperactive type. And so this is really challenging for a lot of kids because they have both difficulty paying attention and also they feel like they want to move their body.
So if a kid has trouble staying focused in class and also has a hard time staying in their seat, this could be a sign of the combined type of ADHD. But all of this sounds like pretty common behavior. How do you know if you have ADHD or if you're just being a regular kid? How do you know if you have ADHD?
Well, if you're a kid, what I recommend is you go online and you type in something like ADHD in kids or ADHD in children.
Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder is a psychiatric disorder of the neurodevelopment type in which there are significant problems with attention and hyperactivity, avoid stimulus, sustained attention, sounds like me. Trouble focusing in class, restlessness, talks excessively, difficulty remembering things, frequently loses homework, difficulty in remembering things. This is scary. Is it possible that I have ADHD? Maybe we better find out. I decided to head back to the Sachs Center to undergo a full ADHD assessment. There are several tools that a doctor can use to determine if a kid has ADHD. First, Dr. Sachs would have to conduct an interview with my parents. Then I would have to fill out a few surveys and take a test on the computer. Finally, I'd have to sit down with Dr. Sachs to talk about my behavior and how it affects my life. The written part of the assessment focused on my feelings. This helps the doctor determine if I have ADHD or some other condition. Depression is a disorder characterized by low mood, low self-esteem, and loss of interest in normally enjoyable activities.
Sometimes kids come to my office and they think they have ADHD because they have problems focusing and paying attention in school. But what's really happening is they're having some kind of emotional problem and maybe depressed. Because if you're depressed and you're thinking about something sad, you're not able to focus on what the teacher's saying. So that's why we have to make sure that the kid who comes here does not have depression. This was the assessment of depression, and obviously, every kid feels sad from time to time, and sometimes feels sad. But a kid who is depressed would, might select always, like I always feel lonely, I always hate myself.
I'd also have to do a survey to screen for anxiety. Anxiety is a disorder characterized by excessive worrying, uneasiness, and fear based on real or imagined events.
So why don't you take this one so that we can see if you have ADHD or you have anxiety or neither.
After Dr. Sachs determined that I wasn't depressed or anxious, we were ready to move forward. Next up, I'd have to take something called a continuous performance test on the computer. Basically, I'd have to watch the screen and click the mouse whenever a letter appeared, except X. This test would measure my sustained and selected attention and impulsivity. Okay, look, here's the deal. I totally rule at video games, so this part should be no problem for me. Okay, maybe I don't rule as much as I thought.
So what we're going to look at, this is the report that is generated based on how you did on the continuous performance test. Your results better match somebody without ADHD. So this is a good thing for you because it shows that you are able to focus and pay attention.
For the last part of the assessment, Dr. Sachs and I would have a deep conversation about my behavior and how it affects my life.
ADHD really is, it's about attention and focus, but it's about self-regulation. So I'll ask you a couple questions about that, okay? And this is also clues to whether you have ADD. I forget to bring my books or homework home from school.
Probably monthly.
Monthly may not be so unusual. When you're starting a project, like for example, you get a homework or a project to do at school, it's really hard to get started. For example, you know what the word procrastinate means?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's always something that you want to do before you actually get started doing it. And that's a big problem for kids with ADD. And a lot of times they have to wait till, like the last minute when the adrenaline starts going for them to complete it. How about you?
I really enjoyed talking with Dr. Sachs. He made me think a lot about my own conduct and how it affects me. I realized that a lot of my behavior was just part of being a regular 11-year-old kid. But I was still a little bothered by all that scary stuff I read on the internet. So I looked on the internet for like ADHD in kids and the symptoms of ADHD. And I realized I do a lot of those symptoms, and I got a little nervous. So why do some other kids or me have some of those symptoms, but they don't actually have ADHD?
It's a good question because you're right. Some of the symptoms that we talked about happen to normal kids. You said you might forget things from time to time, right? But if you have ADHD, you're forgetting things all the time, which means you're forgetting your books at school, you can't do your homework. You said it's difficult to sit still and you daydream sometimes, right? Well, the kids with ADHD are daydreaming all the time, so that it's really hard to understand what the teacher's saying and to pay attention. And you have normal problems that any other kid your age would have, but they're not significant and they don't impact your life to such a degree. So in conclusion, Zachary, you do not have ADHD.
So even though going through the assessment was a little scary at first, I learned a lot about myself, and I'm glad I went through the process. But some kids might get a different diagnosis, and I wonder what life is like for them. This is Jackson. He's a 10-year-old kid that lives with ADHD every day.
ADHD is like I'm running on a track and my brain is running on a track and it can't stop. Can't stop. It's just like it's running and it just can't stop. It's just like my mind's working so hard it can't like get a break.
Kids with ADHD have a hard time focusing and often find their thoughts drifting into different subjects.
It's like I'm doing some math work, it's so hard, I have to go like, oh, I'm thinking of Star Wars now. Now I'm thinking of buying a lightsaber. Maybe I'm now thinking of a electronic. Ooh, look at that bird out the window. I got really distracted.
And this kind of mental distraction can be a really big problem for a kid at school.
First the teacher's talking about what I have for homework, and then she's talking about a whole different book that we have to read. I'm like, wait, what? So what now? It's hard to focus, to pay attention. This worksheet may take 5 minutes for a regular kid, 2 hours for an ADHD kid.
In speaking with Jackson, I began to understand how tough having ADHD can be, but he's actually found a number of ways to manage it. One way is through physical activity, like swimming.
I was one of the best swimmers. I learned most of my skills since I was 3, and that's how I started swimming.
In fact, participating in organized sports is an excellent way for kids with ADHD to have a physical outlet while also learning the value of teamwork and collaboration. Jackson also told me that he uses his creative mind to develop his own stories.
I like to create own worlds and technology. I like to not create, build it, but I like to just imagine in my head, imagine tropical beaches with dog/human people with tails. They have a red giant sun. I have one book that I drew the planet on it, that I drew a space war.
Jackson loves music, which helps him focus his energy.
I used to play piano, now I play drums. I like it.
Playing a musical instrument can help kids develop concentration skills while also giving them an outlet when they're restless.
Drums help me with my ADHD because I like to bang stuff and get my energy out. So with the drums, you're hitting the drums. I don't bang it, but overall, it gets my energy out.
I was also surprised to learn that Jackson is a very talented singer.
I enjoy singing, it gets my energy out too.
Research shows that music can provide the brain with rhythm and structure, which also helps somebody with ADHD stay on a linear path of thought.
My parents say I have a talent for that, and I agree.
It was great to meet Jackson. I was really inspired to see that even though having ADHD might have its challenges, it can be managed by channeling the energy towards something creative and positive.
And I don't want people to think we're dumb because we are smart.
But sometimes it's hard to manage ADHD on your own, and getting professional support might be helpful. I was curious about the different ways that Dr. Sachs and other therapists would treat ADHD.
What would happen if, I came to you because I had ADHD?
What we do for kids with ADHD is we provide both coaching and therapy.
With coaching, a professional can help a kid develop strategies to improve their life. For example, if a kid has trouble getting their homework done, a professional can help them develop a schedule for how to manage their time after school. Or if they're having trouble remembering things, they can create a checklist of what needs to be brought to school every single day.
We figure out what you're not strong at and what you need help with, and we'll develop different strategies to improve those things.
Sometimes ADHD can also be managed with behavioral therapy.
And then for other kids, we do something like talk therapy where they'll tell me their problems about being angry or sad or frustrated.
A therapist can help a kid explore techniques and strategies for dealing with a spectrum of emotions, such as sadness, fear, anger, or frustration.
As a child psychologist, I actually like to hear those things because I know that it'll make the kid feel better when they share it.
I also learned that kids with ADHD should pay special attention to their nutrition and diet.
So how can nutrition and diets help kids with ADHD?
Well, nutrition and diet is a really big part of the treatment for ADHD. One of the big factors that makes ADHD worse is sugar. Now, I know kids like sugar in what? Ice cream, candy,
Pizza, cookies, soda, milkshakes, sports drinks, kids' cereals, cupcakes. Yeah, I love all that.
What happens is sugar impacts the communication system. So if it makes it difficult for our brain to tell our bodies what to do. For example, if your brain is saying, oh, I have to go do homework now, right, after school, and you drink a big thing of Coke, you may get a little bit of burst of energy, but what's going to happen is the signal between your brain and your body that says continue to do work, continue to work hard, is going to have problems, and you're going to be more apt to want to do fun things and things that are easy.
In some cases, ADHD might be treated with medication. Taking medication is a serious subject. For a kid, and especially parents, this can be pretty scary. So I made sure to ask about this directly.
I know a lot of parents and maybe kids get scared with the idea of medicating their kid. But the fact is that ADHD medicine is well researched, and it's been around for about 50 years. So there's a lot of evidence that it works. So that's why we include it in our treatment process. So if you do decide to take medicine, it's best to work with your doctor because everybody's body is different. And there's a handful of good ADHD medicines to try.
Some of the more common ADHD medications you might have heard about are Ritalin, Adderall, and Dexedrine. Each of these may have different side effects. So if you're taking medicine, it's very important to discuss how you're feeling with your parents and the doctor. In researching for this project, I really learned a lot. Most importantly, I learned there are different types of ADHD and different ways it can be addressed.
The treatment of ADHD is controlling it and managing it. It's like it's always there, like diabetes will always be there, but you have to use diet and nutrition and maybe medicine and coaching with a therapist like me to really learn how to manage it.
So if you're a kid and you think you have some of the symptoms of ADHD, you should talk to your parents and consider visiting a professional. The assessment isn't that scary, and you might even find it to be fun and maybe even educational. Who knows, maybe you don't even have ADHD. But if you do, a professional can help create a personalized treatment plan to help improve your daily life. Because after all, being a kid isn't always easy. So it's nice to have a little help.